Recently announced BMF title fight between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje at UFC 291. The winner of this fight will probably fight for the title with the champion of this weight class, Islam Makhachev. Hello fighters. This is World of MMA. In this video I will give a prediction on a potential bout between Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier. But before we start this video, don't forget to subscribe and like it, so as not to miss new interesting videos. Let's go! The 31-year-old Dagestani is at his peak. Now Makhachev has a streak of 12 wins in a row in the world's premier promotion and the third place in the ratings regardless of the category. Islam's career began in 2010 and he followed his older brother's path, Pro FC M1. But in contrast to Nurmagomedov, Makhachev had 11 victories, enough to be invited to the UFC. Khabib had 5 more. With an 11-0 record in May 2015, Islam made a bright debut. He choked Leo Kuhns in the middle of the second round and, as an undefeated fighter, received his next opponent. It was Brazilian Adriano Martins with a 28-7 record and a controversial win over Rustam Khabilov in his previous fight. Makhachev started confidently, pushing Martins and working at number 1. However, not even 2 minutes later, Adriano failed his opponent in one of his attacks, and with a clean right side punch inflicted his first defeat on Islam, also by knockout. Surprisingly, the Brazilian has not won again since then and has long since left the elite promotion. The Dagestanian took a break for a year, but there was also a story about meldonium, which annoyed the whole Russian sport. The return in September 2016 marked the beginning of the 12-fight winning streak that Makhachev now has under his belt. Among the defeated fighters, Nick Lentz, Gleison Tibau, Davy Ramos and Arman Tsarukyan. But Islam lacked flashy finishes, and in 2021 he began to show them. In March, he strangled Drew Dober. In the summer he led the tournament for the first time, also finishing Thiago Moises. And at the end of October, getting the most status opponent at the time, Dan Hooker. Makhachev simply decimated the New Zealander. At the end of February last year, Islam and Beneil Dariush had to decide who would be the next title challenger, but the Assyrian got injured, and instead he was challenged by a tough Bobby Green. It took the Russian fighter just under 3.5 minutes to secure another finish, his 4th in a row. Dana White couldn't ignore Islam any longer, and Makhachev got his long-awaited title shot. On the eve of UFC 280, Dagestani's haters and ardent Oliveira fans believed in Charles's chances, but the Russian fighter cleanly demolished the Brazilian and mockingly strangled the promotion's record holder by submissions. Islam then faced number 1 pound for pound Alexander Volkanovski and won by unanimous decision of the judges. Dustin is an experienced fighter. 28 fights in the UFC, that number says it all. If many fighters are given the nickname Bad Boy, then Dustin was like that all his childhood. He never graduated from high school, preferring to fight everyone who challenged him. He even spent time in juvenile detention. All of this is hard to reconcile with the current Poirier, who spends a lot of time on charity. It was MMA that turned the young bully into an athlete with a big heart. Dustin always liked Van Damme movies and tried different sports: boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, which eventually led him to mixed martial arts in 2009. It took a little over a year for Diamond to rack up a 7-0 record and earn an invitation to the WEC. But this California promotion was in its last days and Dustin had only 2 fights there, in the first of which he suffered the first defeat of his career. That's how he ended up in the UFC. 11 fights at featherweight, 8 wins, one of which stands out. Poirier was the first and only one so far to finish Max Holloway. But there were losses, too, to Cub Swanson, the Korean Zombie, in a crazy fight, for which the fighters received a Fight of the Night bonus, and later many publications called that fight the best fight of 2012. And from McGregor, after losing to the Irishman, Dustin made the decision to change his weight class to lightweight. The transition went well for him. 9 fights, 1 loss to skilled puncher Michael Johnson, who was at his peak at the time. One more fight was ruled a failure due to illegal punching of Alvarez. In the rematch, though, Poirier spectacularly knocked out Eddie, and before that knocked out Pettis and Gaethje. This series put Diamond in a fight for the interim title while Khabib was serving his disqualification. The opponent was the familiar Holloway, who of course wanted to take not only the belt, but also a rematch for his only early loss. If you saw the Blessed One fight against Qatar at the beginning of last year, you can imagine what Max could do in 25 minutes. He did, but Poirier was able to get the upper hand in that war and the right to fight Nurmagomedov. But like Khabib's other opponents, after the fight Dustin only added one in the loss column. After that he went for surgery and took the biggest break of his career. He came back in the summer of 2020 and again in a great fight, one of the best of that year, against Dan Hooker he won. Recovered from the considerable damage that the New Zealander had inflicted on him, Poirier wanted a new challenge. And he did, in a rematch against Conor McGregor, in January 2021. Another. McGregor's return. And again he was very nice to Dustin Poirier, only occasionally reminding him that their last meeting was not too quick, and that the Irishman would like to improve this achievement. But in the end he suffered his first defeat by knockout. 6 months later, Conor changed tactics and Dustin gave up a title shot and opted for a trilogy. In the summer Poirier and McGregor met for the third time and again Dustin surprised the world by winning by TKO. Now, against the Irishman, he put a point, or maybe a dotted line, and got the fight for the belt. But Oliveira defended his title quite easily. Then he got back on the winning track by choking Michael Chandler in the third round in a tough fight. Now let's move on to the breakdown of this fight. In terms of wrestling, Islam Makhachev, who is the best in all things American, will be much better. Dustin had huge problems in wrestling and lost his title fights against Oliveira and Nurmagomedov because of it. In terms of stand-up, I think Poirier will be better. He's beaten a lot of masterful punchers in this division and is the best boxer in the UFC. In terms of cardio, Dustin, who is a cardio machine, will be better. He's been in a lot of 5-round fights and looked a lot better than Makhachev, who went out in the 5th round last fight. In experience he will also be better than Poirier, who has fought many famous fighters and had 27 fights in the UFC. I think Islam Makhachev will win this fight by submission in the 3rd or 4th round. Poirier will tire of Makhachev's fight and tap to surrender. What do you friends think? Write your opinions in the comments. Bye all.